And good morning. Welcome to WASA Distance Education Center and PLAR Math. And today we are starting our first class in week 6. So this is the last week before the Christmas break. So just our 2 classes this week, and then we're off for 2 weeks. So try to get as much work finished and submitted before the break as you can, and then we'll pick up after the break. So today we're going to be finishing up lesson 2, and if we have time, we'll move on to lesson 3. If not, we'll start lesson 3 on Thursday. So to participate in classes, you can do it via radio or Zoom. The instructions are in your study guide, or you can talk to your DEC or contact me. All PLAR Math students are welcome to attend classes. So if you signed up for radio Zoom classes or if you signed up for IL, it doesn't matter. You can still attend the radio Zoom tutorials. And if you can't be in class during the radio Zoom times, then you can still watch the recorded classes on YouTube. Excuse me. To contact me, you can use email, phone, or send a message on Facebook. My contact information is all on the cover page of the study guide as well as each lesson. The PLAR English classes from last term are still available on YouTube. So if anybody who's still working on their PLAR English from last term, you can go to YouTube to watch the classes. And the old PLAR math classes from the last time I taught last year are still available on my YouTube channel. So if you are working ahead of where we are now in class and you want to see how to do something, you can go and watch those old classes, and they are being updated. So now we have a WASA Distance Education Center YouTube channel where all of the classes, all of the radio Zoom classes are being posted. So there is a playlist there for all of the courses. So you can go there for the new PLAR English and Math courses, or you can go to my Facebook, my YouTube channel for the old math classes from last term, the last term I taught the math. Just a reminder to PLAR students, if you didn't finish in Term 1A, so you didn't finish your PLAR English in Term 1A, you can continue to work on it and continue to submit the key questions. You are not withdrawn from PLAR. Once you sign up for it, then you are in for the year. You don't have to reapply every term. New this year, all PLAR students have the option of writing the culminating activity instead of doing the lessons and the key questions. So even if you've already started to complete and submit some of the key questions, if you want to, you can try writing the culminating activity. If you pass the culminating activity, then you get your missing grade 9 and 10 credits. And you don't have to finish up the lessons and key questions, and you just move on to the next subject. If you're not successful with the culminating activity, then you will have to go through the lessons and complete the key questions. And then once you've done that, you will write another culminating activity at the end. Okay, so you get more than one chance to write the culminating activity. If you're doing the lessons, as you're going through the lessons, you will notice that there are support questions in the lessons and there are key questions. So the support questions are scattered throughout the lesson. So you'll read a section, there will be a support question. You read another section, there will be another support question. The key questions are all located at the end of the lesson so that you can just pull off those pages of the key questions and work on them apart from your lessons. So as you're going through the lessons, do the support questions. The answers are at the end of the lesson right before the key questions. So do the support questions and then check your answers against the answers there. If you're doing really well with the support questions, so you're getting most of them right or all of them right, then you move on to the key questions. The key questions are the questions that have marks. They are the questions that you submit to me for marking. Okay? Do not send me the support questions because the answers are at the end of your lesson. So you check your own answers to the support questions. Key questions you send to me. So ways to submit your work, there are a lot of different ways. The first way, of course, is to give it to your DEC, and your DEC will send it out to us here in Sioux Lookout. If you don't have a DEC, you don't have a learning center, or your DEC is away, then you can submit your own work. And there are several ways of doing that. So the first way, if you have access to a scanner, is to scan and email your own work to studentwork@nnec.on.ca and make sure that you CC it to me so that two people are receiving it. Or if you have access to a fax machine, you can fax to our toll-free number. One thing to remember that's very important to remember, if you're submitting your own work, be sure to write your name, the subject, and your teacher's name on your work, especially your name, because we need to know who's submitting the work and who to send it back to. So make sure that your name is there. Another way, if you don't have access to a scanner or a fax machine, is to use your smartphone. With your smartphone, you can either take photos of your work or you can scan your work, and then you can either email it to that same email address and CC it to me, or you can send it on Facebook Messenger. Okay, so whichever works better for you. Number 4, if you are in Sioux Lookout or the surrounding area, then you can drop it off. You can use our outdoor mailbox, which is located in the parking lot at the side of the building. Or you can knock on the front door. Our front door is still locked. You can knock on the front door and hand it to the person who opens the door. Again, make sure your contact information is there. You can also use Google Docs to complete your work, and then you can send me the link. Okay, make sure that you make the link shareable so that once I get it, I can open it. And then the last way is to use Google Classroom. So if you want to use Google Classroom, please contact me so that I can send you the link and codes, and so that I know that you are using Google Classroom. Okay. At the end of term, at the end of every term, but at the end of term 1B, which will be in January, WASA will have 2 student draws, one for students who earned a credit during the term and one for students who submit work during the term. So for every lesson you submit, your name will be entered into a draw. So for PLAR, if you complete all 5 lessons, that's 5 chances for you to win a prize. And if you complete, do the culminating activity and you pass it, earn your credits, then your name goes into that draw as well. So you could potentially win 2 prizes at the end of the term. So make sure you submit your work and send it in to your teacher. We did do a draw yesterday for all the students for one draw per community for active students. So Christmas draw, and I'm not sure if that's been announced yet, but it will be announced on Facebook. So keep an eye on your Facebook. So to start off, we're going to do a review of what we covered last week on Thursday, and then we're going to move on to the last topic in lesson 2. So on Thursday last week, we looked at statistics. We looked at mean, median, mode, and range. Those are the 4 types of statistics that we are looking at. So the mean is probably the one that you're most familiar with. This is the one where you add all the numbers together so that you find the sum of the numbers. So that means for this group of numbers, 7 plus 3 plus 4 plus 1 plus 7 plus 6, you add them all together, get your total. So 7 plus 3 is 10, plus 4 is 14, plus 1 is 15, plus 7 is 22, plus 6 is 28. Okay, so add them all together, and then you divide by how many numbers there are. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So then you divide by 6. And 6 divides evenly into 28 4 times with the remainder of 4. So if you do it on a calculator, you get 4.66. So the average is 4.66. Sometimes you might need to round that, and if you need to round it to the nearest whole number, Then you look at the digit to the right of the nearest whole number, which in this case is 6. 6 is more than 5, so you would round 4. You would add 1 to the 4 to round it to 5. So sometimes you'll be asked to round and sometimes you won't. And it will tell you round to 1, 2, 3, or whatever. First, second, or third place. Okay, so that is the one you're most familiar with because that's the one that like teachers use when they're finding your mark, your final mark and things like that. So that's probably the one you're most familiar with. The second type is the median. So the median basically is the number that's in the middle. Now, this can be tricky because sometimes if you have an even group of numbers or an even number of numbers, there are 2 in the middle. So for our example here, we've got 7, 3, 4, 1, 7, 6. So we've got 6 numbers there. So if you want to find the number that's in the middle, first of all, you have to arrange them in order from smallest to biggest. So 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, 7. We have 2 numbers in the middle, 4 and 6. So when you have an even number, you pick the 2 middle ones, then you have to add those 2 together, 4 plus 6, and then you're going to divide by 2. So 10 divided by 2 equals 5. So in this case, the median is 5, even though 5 is not a number in our list. And you'll find that that happens sometimes. The median or the mean or the mode is not going to be a number that's in the list. If we had an odd number, so if we had 7, 3, 4, 1, and 7, we've got an odd number, we put them in order, 1, 3, 4, 7, 7, then we can find the middle number. The middle number is 4, so then our median, would be 4. So if you have an odd number of data, then it's easier to find the median. If it's an even number, then you have to add the 2 middle numbers and divide. But remember, you have to put the numbers in order first. Okay, then we looked at mode, and the mode is the most common number. So which number or numbers are repeated? So in our list of numbers, we've got 7, 3, 4, 1, 7, 6. The number that's repeated is the 7. It's the only one that's repeated, so our mode is 7. If none of the numbers are repeated, then we have no mode. Don't put down 0. Okay, because that means that 0 has been repeated several times, but 0 is not even in our list, so it can't be a mode. So don't put in 0, write down no mode. Okay. Sometimes there might be 2 modes. So you might have 2 numbers that are repeated 2 or 3 times. So then you might have 2 modes. The range is the difference. And when we say difference in math, we're talking about subtraction. So if you're asked to find the difference, that means you have to subtract. So our range is the difference between the highest and the lowest numbers in the list. So if we look at our list, the highest number is 7. The lowest number is 1, so we subtract. 7 take away 1 is 6. Our range is 6. Okay, so those are these types of statistics that we looked at. So the range, you just have to subtract. The mean, median, and mode, sometimes you get them mixed up because they all start with the same letter. But just remember median, middle, mode, most often, or most common. So MO, mode, MO, most common. So just have to remember which one is which, and you should have no trouble. Okay, so that in lesson 2 now, we've done decimals, percents, mean, median, mode, and range. Today, we're going to look at circle graphs. So in your lesson, beginning on page 12 is some information on circle graphs. Excuse me. On page 13 is support question number 7. 13, 14, 15, and 16. So there are 4 support questions there for you to look at. Take your time, make sure you do those support questions, and then check your answers at the end of the lesson. So first of all, what is a circle graph? So a circle graph sometimes is referred to as a pie chart. So circle graph, pie chart, same thing. The graph is a shape of a circle. That's why it's called a circle graph, with different wedges that each represent a percentage of the total. So remember, a total when we're talking about percent is 100%. So the whole circle is 100%. These wedges often look like pieces of pie, which is why sometimes they're called a pie chart or a pie graph. Each angle of the circle graph is proportional to the quantity it represents. So here's an example, one example of a circle graph. It's Marie's vacation budget, which was 28, excuse me, $100. Oh, sneezes. Okay, so in her circle graph, she's talking about her vacation budget. For her budget, she spent money on transportation, food, hotel, and activities. So each one of these items is represented in that pie chart. So transportation is the diagonal lines. So we can see that transportation is 42% of her budget. So the biggest part of her budget. Food is the blank one, which was 11% of her budget. Hotel is the crisscross one, 18% of her budget, and activities, 29% of her budget. That's the one with the dots in it. So if we add all these percents together, 42 plus 11 plus 18 plus 29, we get 100%. Okay, so that's her budget. So just from looking at that graph, we can see right away that transportation, like I said, even without seeing the numbers, it's the biggest part of the graph, which means that it was what she spent most of the money on. Food, 11%, is the smallest part of the graph, so we know that she spent the least amount of money on food. So just from looking at that pie chart, we can get a lot of information. Here's another example, favorite pizza toppings. Okay, so the green represents pepperoni, the purple represents cheese, the orange represents sausage, and the red represents supreme pizza. So these are the different types of pizza. So from looking at these, we can see right away that pepperoni is the favorite because it's the biggest part of the circle at 50%. Cheese is the next because it is the next biggest part of the circle at 25%, then sausage, and supreme was the least liked of the 4 different types of pizza. Okay, the next circle graph is public works. So what I guess, municipality budget or whatever. So what the money is spent on. So we have for education, well, let's say other is 45%. Education, 34% of the budget goes to education, 14% goes to public welfare, and 7% goes to highways. So again, most of the money for the municipality or the town is spent on other, which might be parks and recreation, I don't know, I can't even think of what else it could be spent on, but anyway, education is 34% of the budget, public welfare, so like health and those types of things, 14%, and highways, 7%. So the least amount is spent on the roads. Okay, so like I said, just from looking at a graph, we can get a lot of information. Types of circle graphs. So there are different types of circle graphs. They might look different, but they all represent data in much the same manner. So the first type here is called an exploded circle graph, and it's called an exploded because the sections are separated basically. So this kind of graph is used when you have smaller sections because it makes it easier to see those tiny little pieces of the pie. Okay, so these are major religious groups, and you can see the different religious groups. Then we have a 3D circle graph, and this is most often used for aesthetic reasons. So it looks good, basically. This 3-dimensional circle graph often makes the data more difficult to interpret. So it's harder sometimes to figure out what's going on there, but it just looks nice. So people use them for presentations. So again, a circle graph, the whole circle is 100%. So then each section is divided into smaller sections, percentages to represent an amount. Okay, so Monica is opening a restaurant. She wants to offer at least 2 kinds of ice cream flavors for dessert. She uses a data collection company to find out what flavors people prefer. So she wants to know what kinds of ice cream, what flavor of ice cream she should offer in her restaurant. So she wants to find out what people like. So the company uses this circle graph to show the results of the survey. Of the 4 flavors, which 2 flavors would people prefer most? So if we look at this, right away, we can look at the graph and we can see the 2 largest sections. The red section is chocolate and the blue section is vanilla. So the 2 favorite flavors are vanilla and chocolate. So if she wants to offer the most popular flavors, then she would offer vanilla and chocolate in her restaurant. Interpreting circle graphs. So circle graph is a visual way of displaying data, and it's written in percents. Sometimes, so the circle represents 100%. The circle is divided into sections, so depending on how many sections, so we've seen already circles divided into 3 sections, 4 sections, 8 sections, as many as you need. Each section shows what part of 100 that item represents. The circle graph uses different colors for each category being described. Okay, so in this one, spending habits. So we have savings, baseball cards, and food. So if you look at this, you can see right away that savings is the biggest part of the pie graph. So, and we look at the percentage, 50% of the spending habits or the money is on savings, so it's not spent. 10% on baseball cards and 40% on food. So 40 plus 10 plus 50 equals 100. This circle graph describes a student's spending habits. Each color represents what his money is spent on. Blue is savings, red is baseball cards, and green is food. And like I said, by looking at this, you can tell right away that half of the money is saved. Okay, use the circle graph to answer the question. Which foreign language is the most popular? So if we look at this circle graph, these are all foreign languages. The yellow one with the diagonal dotted lines is French. The green with the polka dots or spots is Italian. The blue is German and the pink is Spanish. So from looking at it right away, you can tell that Spanish is the most popular foreign language because it's the biggest part of the circle. Next would be French, then Italian, and then German. Okay, so back to the student spending habits graph. So looking at the graph above, about what percent is not spent on savings. So if you look at this one, there are no percentages mentioned. Nothing is written in there. We just know that, excuse me, the blue is savings, the red is baseball cards, and the green is food. So what percent is not spent on savings? So if we look at the graph, we can say that half is on savings. So the other half is not on savings. So a half as a percent is 50. So 50% of the graph or the money is not spent on savings. 50% is spent on savings, 50 is not. So that's 100%. So first, like I said, look at the wedge that represents savings. It's about 50%. Then determine how much. So you can look at it and you can guess what the percentages are if you're not given the percentages. Example 4, true or false. The following percents could be part of one circle graph. 25% plus 10% and 25%, 10% and 65%. Could they be a part of a circle graph? So for example, could they be represent savings, for example? So first thing we want to do is add the given percents. So 25 plus 10 is 35, plus 65 is 100. And the circle graph represents 100, so these 3 amounts can be a part of one circle graph. Okay, example 5, true or false. The following percents could be a part of the same circle graph. 35% plus, 35%, 70%, and 5%. So we add them together. 35 plus 70 is 105, plus 5 is 110. So 110% cannot be in a circle graph. A circle graph cannot be more than 100%. So then that's false. 35%, 70%, and 5% cannot be part of the same graph. Okay. Favorite sports of students. So if we look at this, students at whatever school, their favorite sports are basketball, baseball, volleyball, soccer, and football. Okay, when you look at the sections, so just looking at basketball is the biggest section, so it's the most popular. Then baseball would be next. Soccer is bigger than football and volleyball, so that would be third. Football would be fourth, and volleyball would be last. Or volleyball and football might be pretty even. They look pretty close. I think football's a bit bigger. Anyway, out of 300 students, about how many students voted for baseball as their favorite sport? So now if we look at that graph, we have no idea what percent it is because there's nothing that tells us. But if I look at the section that's baseball right here, that to me looks like a quarter of the graph. And a quarter of the graph is 25%. Okay, so out of 300 students, how many students voted for baseball as their favorite sport? So now what we have to do is basically you're finding 25% of 300. Okay, so we did this in lesson 2 already. And we looked at percents, we looked at percent of a number. So we want to find out what is 25% of 300. So we got to do a little bit of math here. So first thing we do is we're going to change our 25% to a decimal. So 0.25, and then we're going to multiply 0.25 times or by the amount, which is 300. So 0.25 times 300 will give us 75. So out of 300 students, about how many students voted for baseball? The answer would be D, 75. Okay. In this problem, the sector that represents, okay, so this is, and then just explains how to do it. So what I just did. Okay, so let's do some practice then. So sometimes, so just from looking at what we did, sometimes the percentages will be there, like in some of the graphs we looked at, sometimes they're not. So you have to look very carefully at the sections to see if they are divided evenly. And then if they are, then you can move on from there. You can kind of guess what the percentage is. Okay, so use the circle graphs to answer the following questions. So foreign languages studied. So we already saw this graph. So now let's answer some questions on this graph. So I'm going to put this on a dual page so that I can see all the questions. All right, so look at our graph. We've got 55% Spanish, German 5%, Italian 10%, and French 30%. 55, right now, looking at this, I know that Spanish is the most popular at 55%, and German is the least popular at 5%. So answer our questions. Which foreign language is the least popular? Now, when you're answering questions like this, you should be using complete sentences. You shouldn't be just be putting in the number. So which foreign language is the least popular? So the least popular foreign language is, what did I say already? German at 5%. Okay, so for this graph, you just look at your legend right there, and you can pretty much get your answers. You don't even really need to look at the graph. If 30% of the students chose French, what percent did not choose French? So right here, we know 30% of the students chose French. So remember, got to think about this now. 30% chose French. And that question is what percent did not choose French? So the rest of the students did not choose French. The circle graph is 100%. So all we have to do is take 100%, subtract 30%, and we will find the percent that did not choose French, which is 70%. So 70% did not choose French. Okay, what percent of the students chose Italian? So all we have to do is look at the legend and it tells us 10%. So 10% chose Italian. Okay, what percent of the students did not choose Italian? So there we go again. 100%, take away 10% gives us 90% did not choose Italian. Okay, what percent of the students chose Spanish? Just look at the graph. Spanish is pink, 55%. So 55% chose Spanish. Next question, what percent of the students did not choose Spanish or French? So here we got to do two things. So Spanish is 55%, French is 30%. So Spanish and French together is 85%. So what percent of the students did not choose Spanish or French? 15% did not choose Spanish or French. Now, the other thing you can do here to find your answer, Spanish or French, is to look at what's not Spanish and French, which is Italian, German, and 10 plus 5 is 15. You can find your answer that way. What percent of the students did not choose French and Spanish? So French, that's the same question. Okay, let's skip that one. Next question, what percent of the students did not choose German? So 5% of the students chose German, so 100%. Take away 5 equals 95. So 95% did not choose German. Okay, so you can answer questions using a circle graph. There's the next one on the next page, the Patrick family budget. So this time we have more parts to the circle. We've got 6 instead of 4. So the budget consists of clothing, transportation, rent and utilities, savings, food, and other. So the first question, what percent of the Patrick's budget is spent on transportation? So we find transportation right here. And it says 15%. So if the numbers weren't there, we would look at that little legend there. It was blue with polka dots, and we could see it right here. That's transportation. So 15% is spent on transportation. And I'm not going to use complete sentences because it'll take too long. So anyway, I'll just abbreviate. What percent of the budget is spent on food? So same thing. If percent wasn't there, I look at food and I see it's blue. So I can look over here and see that 25% of the budget is spent on food. Okay, what percent of the budget is not spent on food or savings? So I've got to do two things. I've got to figure food plus savings, 25 plus 10 equals 35%. And so now my question is what percent of the budget is not spent on that? So then I would do 100, take away 35, which will give me 65% is not spent on food and savings. Food or savings. Okay, if 35% of the budget is spent on rent and utilities, so rent and utilities, 35%, what percent is not spent on this? So same thing we just did, 100%, take away 35% equals 65. So 65% is not spent on rent and utilities. Okay, true or false? Okay, read the questions carefully. The Patrick family does not spend any money on clothing. Okay, so look at your legend and clothing is there, so that's false. They do spend money on clothing. Next question, what percent is spent on savings and food together? So savings is 10% plus food is 25%. So that's 35% is spent on savings and food. And last question, if the Patrick family was going to increase their savings by 15%, what would the new percent of savings be? So right now savings is at 10%. They want to increase it by 15%, so we're adding 15, and that will give us 25% would be the new percent on savings. Okay, so you got to read the questions very carefully. All right, so answer the following questions using the information in the graph. And there's lots of different types of questions. Sometimes you're going to have to look at the graph to find the answers, and sometimes you won't. Okay, so this next one is weekly sales of books. So the different types of books are poems, plays, fiction, nonfiction, and comic books. So 5 of them there. So number 1, if the shopkeeper earns $500 in a week, how much did he make from selling nonfiction books? So nonfiction books is 21%. So we need now to find out what is 25% of $500. So we did this already. Like I said, finding percent of a number. So not 25%, it's 21%. 21%. So 21% of $500. So we change our percent to a decimal by dividing by 100. So 0.21. Then we're going to multiply that by 500. So 0.21 times 500 will give us 105. So how much did he make from selling nonfiction books? He made, and we're going to write this as a dollar amount because it's we're talking about money. So he made $105 from selling nonfiction books. Okay, number 2, if the shop, excuse me, if the shopkeeper earns $500 in a week, how much did he make, excuse me, from selling comics? So comic books, 25%. So this time we need to find out what's 25% of $500. So same thing, change your percent to a decimal, divide by 100. You get 25, multiply that by the amount. So we're doing 25% times 500 this time, and our answer is 125. So how much did he make from selling comic books? He made $125 from selling comics. Okay, number 3, out of 120 people, about how many purchased fiction? So where's fiction? 29%. So we need to find 29% of 120. Okay, so we've done this before. Now this time it's 120 people, so it's not money. Okay, so don't make it into a dollar amount. Okay, so change percent to a decimal, divide by 100, get 0.29, multiply that by 120, and you get 34.8. So now the question is, out of 120 people, about how many purchased fiction? So our answer is 34.8. We can't have 34.8 people. We have to round this to a whole number. So about, and you notice the question says about how many. That lets us know that we need to round it. About 34.8 rounds to, it has to be a whole number. So 0.8, 8 is more than 5, so we round up by adding 1. So 34 plus 1 is 35. So about 35 people purchased fiction. Okay, so again, like I said, you got to read your questions very carefully to get the answer, because if you put in for your answer 34.8 for that question, it would be wrong. Because like I said, you can't have 34.8 of a person. Okay, next one, favorite pizza. So we're back to cheese, supreme, sausage, and pepperoni. So according to the pie graph, answer the following questions. Number 1, of the people who took the survey, which pizza do most people prefer? So just look for the biggest number, and it's cheese. So there's your answer, cheese. Number 2, what percentage of people surveyed like supreme pizza the best? So supreme pizza tells us 9%. So circle the answer. Number 3, out of 150 people, about how many people like cheese pizza? So now we got to do some math. Out of 150 people, how many people like cheese? So cheese is 41%, so we need to find 41% of 150. So we got to do our math. So we need to find 41%, change it to a decimal, 0.41 times 150. 0.41 times 150, whoops, 0.41 times 150, there we go, is 25. So here's another one, 25.215. Now again, we can't have 25.215 people, so we need to round it. And it says about how many. So the closest number there for our cheese pizza is 25. So about 25. Okay, number 4, out of 150 people, about how many people like pepperoni pizza? So pepperoni is 28%, so we need to find 28% of 150. So same thing we just did, change your percent to a decimal, so 0.28 times 150 equals, let's try that again, that's definitely not right. 0.28 times 150 equals 42. Okay. Number 5, out of 150 people, how many people like sausage pizza? Sausage is 22%, so we're going to find 22% of 150. So change your percent to a decimal, 0.22 times 150 equals 33. Excuse me, out of 150 people, about how many people like supreme pizza? So supreme pizza is 9%, so we need to find 9% of 150. So 0.09 times 150, 0.09 times 150 equals 1.215. Sorry, 13.5. So we got to round it to 14. Wrong number. So 13.5. Rounds to 14. Number 7. Out of 150 people, about how many people together like supreme and sausage? So we're going to do a bit more math. So supreme is 9% plus sausage is 22%, which gives us 31%. So we need to find 31% of 150. So 0.31 times 150 equals 46.5. So 40 rounds to 47. Out of 150 people, how many people together like cheese and supreme? So cheese is 41 plus supreme is 9. So that's 50%. So 50% of 150 is 75. We don't have 75 there, so we round to 76. So you got to pick the closest number. Number 9, about how many more people like pepperoni pizza than sausage pizza? So pepperoni pizza. So we got to look back to our questions now. So no, how many more people like pepperoni pizza than sausage? So pepperoni is 28%. Sausage is 22%. Okay, so, and we're out of 100. Macaroni's 28 and sausage 22. So about how many more people like pepperoni pizza than sausage pizza? So if we looked at the percentages, so 28 out of 100, 28% is 28 out of 100, so that means 28 people. 22% is 22 out of 100, so that means 22 people. So 28 take away 22 is 6. So the closest number is 9. Number 10, how about how many more people like cheese pizza, sorry, than supreme pizza? So cheese is 41%. Supreme is 9%. So 41 out of 100. So that means 41 people. Take away 9 leaves me with 32. So the closest is 28. Okay, so sometimes you might have to do that. So there's lots of different types of questions that you could end up having to answer based on a circle graph. And sometimes you might not be giving an exact answer. Sometimes you might be rounding. Okay, so be very careful. All right, so that brings us to key question 13, last question in lesson 2. So at the top of the page, we have a pie graph. So this circle graph represents the results of a survey of students and their summer jobs. 34% of students worked in a restaurant. So you can see the numbers on the graph, but over here, 34% worked in a restaurant, 10% in a store, 48% in construction, and 8% on a farm. So depending on how clear the graph is from your workbook, you can use the legend more so than the circle graph. Okay, so 3 questions, that's it. Answer the questions using complete sentences and round answers to the nearest whole number where necessary. So sometimes you're going, one of these questions you're going to have to round. So question A, what percentage of students will be working on a farm? So find that answer, you just look at the graph. Just look at the legend. It tells you right there, 8%. So then you write down your answer. 8% of students will be working on a farm. Next question. Now, the next question you have to read very carefully because it's what fraction of the students will be working in a restaurant. It's not the percentage. So now we have to change a percent into a fraction. So remember, so what is it? Restaurant. So if we go back up here, let's do the dual page thing again because it's easier to see. Okay, I can see all of it at once. Oops. Okay, so percent of students working in a restaurant. So 34% of students work in a restaurant, but we don't want to know the percent. We want the fraction. So remember, 34% means 34 out of 100. So there's your fraction, 34%, 34 out of 100. So now the only thing you have to do is reduce that fraction. Remember, how do we reduce a fraction? We divide the top and the bottom by the same number. Okay, so we've got even numbers, so we know that they're divisible by 2. So both divided by 2, 34 divided by 2 is 17, 100 divided by 2 is 50. So what fraction? 17/50ths will be working in a restaurant. Okay, and the last question, if 70 students were surveyed, how many students will be working in construction? So we got 48% of the students working in construction. So we need to find out what is 48% of 70. Now, we're talking about students. So if you get a decimal number for your answer here, you have to round it. Okay, so change your percent to a decimal, multiply by 70 and you will get your answer. But make sure that you round because we are talking about people and you can't have a part of a person. Okay. Okay, so that is it for our class today. So on Thursday, we'll start lesson 3. So try to get the key questions for lesson 2 finished up before Thursday, and we'll start lesson 3 on Thursday. So if you have any questions, please contact me. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your day. Miigwech.